Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Please take your seats and we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Reality of Artificial Intelligence. It's an event organized for the UCF Celebrates the Arts Festival. My name is Steve Kubler, and I'm host and project lead for our event. And at UCF, I serve as professor of chemistry and optics, and I'm a faculty fellow for student success in chemistry, and founding associate director of the UCF Center for Ethics. UCF Celebrates the Arts provides a unique opportunity for artists to exhibit and perform in world-class facilities and for our community to enjoy the wide range of creative activities that we pursue at UCF. The festival is a culmination of coursework, training, and study that we've pursued throughout the year. So we're so pleased to welcome you here this evening to share in that work. And if you like what you see here tonight, please visit the campus and learn how you can support your hometown university. Art is about creation, but artificial intelligence, or AI, is rapidly changing how we create most everything. And tonight we'll discover why that's happening and where it could take us, and we'll learn what is right with AI and what could be going wrong. There's great optimism for a future with AI, and when you experience our demos and student-run exhibits later this evening, I think you'll see fantastic examples of what is possible. Even the music that played as you entered tonight was created by an AI. But there's also a little bit of gloom and doom. And I'm sure you've heard the stories that the computers are taking over. Well, we're probably safe for now, because if you really listen to that AI-generated music, it had a funky beat, but it was not that great. So anyway, regardless, tonight we're going to dispel myths and learn the reality of AI by hearing from subject matter experts. We'll begin with a keynote address from Dr. Ruben Villegas. He's an AI expert from Google Brain. He'll give us a peek under the hood and explain how AI systems actually work in layman terms. But then he'll tell us also where they're being used and what his outlook is for the future. Next, we're going to enjoy a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Jonathan Beaver. The panel will explore questions raised by AI that connect to aesthetics, artistic creation, technology, human dignity, property rights, economics, ethics, and more. And afterward, we'll pass the mic and let you pose your own questions to our panel. Now, we're going to close the evening with a catered reception where you can meet the panelists and enjoy hands-on demos of AI systems and learn from UCF students who are researching at the frontiers of cognitive science and human-machine interaction. You'll be able to use AI to create your own images, music, and stories, and then mingle and exchange some ideas with one another and think about your future with AI. So now I'd like to acknowledge, if you will please, the many organizations that made this possible, so bear with me. Our event is organized by the UCF Center for Ethics in collaboration with the Center for Computer Vision and the School of Visual Arts Design. Our sponsors include the UCF School of Modeling, Simulation, Training, the Cognitive Sciences Laboratory, the College of Sciences, and the College of Engineering and Computer Science. The festival is sponsored in part by the State of Florida Division of Arts and Culture, the Florida Council on Arts and Culture, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And this festival would not be possible without support of OUC, the Reliable One, and Orlando's Downtown Development Board. I also want to thank, though, the people who made the reality of artificial intelligence a reality, who are also a real pleasure to lead and work with. Our organizing team includes Drs. Jonathan Beaver and Steve Fury, Angela Hernandez-Carlson, Matthew Hall, Paul Lartenoy and Heather Gibson. And I'd also like to acknowledge tremendous support from Dr. Mubarak Shah, Don Merritt, Bryce Jackson, our UCF students here tonight, and the entire UCF Celebrates the Arts team. So I can't say enough about the whole team's tireless effort and patience and boundless creativity, but I'm trying to keep this short. So we put a lot of that content in your program, event program, and I encourage you to read about their individual contributions and their many achievements in scholarship and service. Please join me in a round of applause for our sponsors and organizing team. So our keynote speaker will now be introduced by Dr. Jonathan Beaver. And as I invite him to the podium, I'd like to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Beaver is founding director of the UCF Center for Ethics and associate professor of ethics and digital culture in the Department of Philosophy. His research focuses on the intersections of ethics, technology, and environments, examining specifically how changing conditions shape the nature of relationships. He's the author of numerous articles and author or editor of 4 books. Most importantly, Dr. Beaver is my friend, a great colleague, and an inspiration to students and coworkers, and to me in all the work that we do together. And I know you'll enjoy seeing him in action as he moderates our panel and now introduces our keynote speaker. Dr. Beaver.
Thank you, Dr. Kubler. Thank you so much. And Dr. Kubler did such a great job of introducing and welcoming everybody who helped us put this event together, but I wanted to give Dr. Kubler a round of our applause for his work. For otherwise, this event wouldn't have happened. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Villegas, who stands as a role model for our community of UCF student success. He conducted undergraduate research in the UCF Center for Computer Vision and co-authored with his UCF mentor, Dr. Mubarak Shah. After leaving us and graduating from UCF with his undergrad degree in computer science, Dr. Villegas received his PhD from the Computer Science and Engineering Department at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He's gone on to become a leader in the field of AI, currently working as a research scientist with Google Brain. The research he continues to do in machine learning and generative modeling informs object mapping in virtual worlds, motion prediction, video generation from text inputs, and more. We're very pleased to have him share his expertise with us this evening. Dr. Villegas will participate in our interdisciplinary panel on AI and ethics, which will be up here next. But first, he'll join us in a keynote address in which he'll talk about the state of AI systems based on his work. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ruben Villegas.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruben. Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction. And okay, so now that's ready. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about artificial intelligence for creative expression. Here, excuse me. Sorry? Oh, okay. So maybe let me. I can just. Can you hear me better? Or should I take this one off and just because I have a microphone here and. Okay, so that's better probably because it's making noise. Okay, actually, let me quickly take care of this. Here we go. Oh, thank you. Thanks. I think that one's working. It was just that this one was making noise. But yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, so let's get started. Yeah. So first I want to start with what creative expression, at least what I found it means. So creative expression is basically the ability to use our minds and imaginations to just create something that just represents who we are and what our thoughts are. And as you can see, there's many ways of creative expression, such as dance, painting, and music, and so on. So what do some forms of creative expression involve? So as you can see here, there's many things that involve the creative expression, like maybe use this software for music development or the canvas and brushes for painting, and then these video editing tools. That these are the things that some people use for the creative expression. And so what role can artificial intelligence play here? So the main role that a lot of us are working on is try to empower people without access to these types of trainings or materials or expensive software to just visualize their ideas. And also, at the same time, provide artists with a way to quickly sketch and design different concepts that can later be refined into some final product. But in both scenarios, this could help even artists or non-artists. So, how this developed from artificial intelligence from the past into what's powering creative expression now. So one example is that these technologies have been around for some time, and have been developing throughout the years. So this is actually some of the earliest, not very early, but in the recent decade, methods for image generation, which are the ones that we are familiar with, that you can see all around you. So back in 2013, 2014, this was what we could generate images, so image of faces that you can barely see. And this was just image generation, the earlier image generation models that everything is based on now. And then things evolved into something that looks like this, I guess, perceptual, easy, barely visible as a horse, and then but things continue evolving. And now recently, starting in the 2020s, DALL-E happened, which is the OpenAI software that people figured out that you can just use open-ended text from open domains and just have a machine, given that text, generate complicated images such as this avocado chair that you see here. And now, in these past 2 years, things have been speeding up greatly, where we are to the point where you can generate this image here of a brain riding a rocket ship to the moon. And it's all you're doing here is just giving the prompt description to the model, and then you get these types of outputs. And this has been happening not just with image generation, it's music generation, which was mentioned earlier, video generation more recently. There's other, like text generation is also a form of this, but you're actually generating text, which is this ChatGPT that some of you might be familiar with. And so on. So this has been happening for a long time. It's just recently got to the point where the general public actually knows about these things. So how do these technologies work? So it starts with a large collection of some data. In this case, text and image pairs for the image generation examples that you have seen. Just a large amount of text and image pairs. And then you have this data, you provide some inputs to some machine learning model or some model that just can kind of learn from this data. And you also provide targets to the model. So in this case, the inputs would be the text, and the targets would be an image. And then given these targets, you measure some error, and then you kind of feed that error back into the model. So the model first tries to generate something, and then it's probably something that doesn't make any sense. And then through these errors, the model starts adapting and trying to better map the inputs into the outputs. And then through this iterative kind of feedback process, feed-forward and feedback process, the model learns to model what the training data, this original data has. And from this data, the model can just create multiple things by combining what it learned from the training data. So what it generates, it could be things that are outside of the training data or don't even exist in the real world. And then the next thing is, what is text condition generation? As I mentioned before, there's many forms of them, and one of the ones that we're maybe more excited about because of the way that we communicate humans with language is the language generation models, where you have some text as input, which would be like a question that you ask to some algorithm, and then the algorithm, or the other way around, the algorithm just continues, gives you some text output, and then you give it an input, and then you give it an output, and then it gives you an output, and so on. You can have a conversation with this agent. And this is similar to what the text image generation and video generation, all these other generations are doing. You just give some instructions in English, and then the model just gives you some outputs. And then, so what is an artificial neural network, which is what all of these things are based on? This is a representation of that, where you have some inputs, X here, and then there's a bunch of numbers here in between, and then you have your outputs. These numbers in between is something that we let the model adjust, like all these connections here, we let them adjust it during the training that I mentioned before. But for example, this unit here, H2, is computed by combining all these inputs here, and also actually the inputs go all the way down to these inputs. But the output, this output Y, it's basically a combination of all these nodes here, all these nodes here, and all these nodes here. And the connections are learned during the training that I mentioned before to try to match the target. So these are fixed from the data, and these in-betweens are learned to be able to figure out how to map the inputs into the output. And how does actually these models go from noise to something meaningful, like an image? So this is a case of a model called Maskit, but there's other, like the diffusion models, which do a similar thing. In this case, we start with nothing, and then this nothing gives you a lot of noise that doesn't make any sense. And then you kind of start iteratively creating the image piece by piece, or in the diffusion sense, kind of adjusting the image little by little in multiple time steps. So then you kind of adjust, because the model already learned to do these adjustments during the training phase. You give it just adjusts, and then until you get the final image that looks like this. So that's basically how it starts from something. In this case, it's not noise, but it's just nothing, or it could be noise as well. It kind of just refines, and gets the final output. There's other variations of models that can go directly from here to the output, which are not discussed here, but basically you have some computations in the middle that gives you the output. And those are learned during the first phase that I mentioned. And how can these technologies actually create something new? So this is one exciting thing. Yeah. This is my favorite from our paper recently. So these models our goal, at least as scientists, we want these models to be able to do something called compositional generalization. And this compositional generalization, what it does is, if the model learns some concepts from the training set, in this case would be what a chicken looks like, what a dog looks like, and then if the model really learned these concepts well, you can recombine it in whatever crazy ways you want. In this case, you have a chicken dog walking in the park. And this is my favorite example of compositional generalization, because this is an animal that doesn't exist. At least as far as we know. Maybe in another planet, I don't know. So that's how these technologies can create something new. It could also grab pieces of other images and put them together in different ways, besides just the concepts of chickens and dogs in this case. So the latest models powering creative expression. So the first ones we're all excited about are the language models, where what these language models do is basically you have an input here, the detective investigated, and you have this tokenization step, which kind of splits it into different pieces. And then you have some start it's called token. These are all, we call them tokens. That's why this tokenization step. And the way that these language models work is we have some start token, and then from that you try to predict the next token, which would be the, and then from the you predict detective, and then from detective you predict detective and everything before detective, the, and start you predict best, and then and so on. So from here, given all these things in the past, all these tokens in the past, you predict the next one. And that's how these text models are basically learned. All you do is predict the next word, and this way the model learns some type of, a distribution, as they say, of what are the next possible words given the previous words. So you can randomly sample the next word, and that's why you get this ChatGPT or Bard or Llama from Facebook kind of generating text. It's just sampling from what it thinks the next word would be based on what it has seen that humans type. It's basically mimicking what humans do. Not we don't want to say reasoning, but it's mimicking at least how humans generate language. And so yeah, these are the models that are usually, like here's some example of Bard and ChatGPT, Bard again, and Llama, which are language models that are there that can just generate text. And here I tried to generate a rap song in Drake style about artificial intelligence in the arts. And this is what it gave me. Maybe we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but I like the last part where it goes, let's start the journey and let our creativity flow after AI in the arts is the way to go. And yeah, so you can do all these things. Oh, okay. So, yeah, and then I mentioned before the Maskit, there's these diffusion models which start from noise and then iteratively learn from noise go to an image data set, this is the other kind of things that people are using now for image generation. Here's another one called Party, which is using the text modeling as before, where you have a text encoder using this sequence model that I mentioned before, and then basically what they do is map, and what we all do is basically, in this case, map from the English language into the perceptual or visual language. So first we learn something that tokenizes this image into some language, it's the way to see it is a visual kind of description of the language that describe the image, and then you map from the English language in this case to the visual language, and then you can decode. And these models are able to get you images that you've seen around, like this crazy thing, the Egyptian and God Anubis somewhere, I think it's New York or something, Los Angeles, this panda riding a horse, reading a book, and so on. And all these things are learned from the data. Maybe the model knows about pandas, about horses, and then even though there might not be a horse or panda riding a horse, the model figures out how to put these things together. And there's also video generation currently happening, and there's some of the examples are the diffusion-based models. And I can, maybe I can replay a little bit, but these are all generated similar to images. It's in a mature state, so it's not as good as the images, but you can generate now videos as well. And this is actually my work, which a work that we did with some collaborators at Google, where we can generate from a whole story. We can generate full, long videos of things that you see here happening around. Like here, there's a story of a balloon. This penguin was the thing surfing, and then there's this astronaut in some crazy world. And all these are basically just a story narrated and reflected into video. Here's one example with the entire paragraph of things that we gave it. But there's lots of traffic in a futuristic city. An alien spaceship arrives, which you saw before. The camera gets inside the alien spaceship. The camera moves forward until showing an astronaut in the blue room, and there's the astronaut. And then we can keep telling it, now the astronaut is typing in the keyboard, and then it starts typing. And then the camera moves away from the astronaut leaves the keyboard and walks to the left. And then all these things, the model just continues to generate images that generate what we are describing. And all of these are basically just matrix multiplications. There's nothing like 3D engines or anything like that going on behind the scenes. But the model continues to follow the prompts. And now there's a fish, and I think we just go above the water at some point, and the camera starts going into some buildings and so on. So for the sake of time, I guess I'll pause it here, but it continues generating a bunch of things, and you can maybe look at we have videos online of this, but it's a full movie generated by our model. You zoom in, zoom out, all these things are possible. So the outlook, the effects of artificial intelligence on art, I'm on the positive side, you can visualize with basically you can visualize, if you can describe it, you can generate it. So here, the brain example, again, a brain riding a rocket ship to the moon, what it would look like, and the machine gives you something that looks like that. It may not, for other prompts, it may not be as perfect, so maybe you have to do some refinement, and artists are a very important piece, and I forgot to mention, these videos that I showed were generated by our artist friends. So we have some artist people at Google that help us generate a lot of these videos that are actually creative, because the videos that I generated were not creative at all. And they actually generated like this really cool looking things that you see here. None of these were created by me, but they just grab our model and they get to prompting, like in the examples that you see here. So the good thing is about that we can do some quick prototyping projects, like a quick sketch of a story like the one that you see here that is not perfect, but then artists can refine or add more things, or they can think of creative ways to use the model. Like, again, our artist friend thought of transitioning into a nebula for some reason, which looks really great, and then it starts jumping on a trampoline. But yeah, so these type of things still need a creative mind. So it's not like these methods are actually fully replacing the artistic input. And then this could be seen as a new paintbrush, where here's another one created by one of our artist friends too, Irina. Where you can just see as this artificial intelligence as a new paintbrush that can allow you to create things faster. It won't, so far, give you full control, but people can play around with it to figure out how to get the outputs that they want. But it's basically a new paintbrush where you don't need to have a paintbrush and take all the time to paint things. But also these models there are other models that you can actually refine specific pieces of the image that you maybe want to change. That can also, it needs a creative input to be able to actually get something that looks cool. And yeah, so that's all for my talk, and yeah, thanks for your attention. Okay, so.
Thank you, Ruben.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Or use that one?
Yeah, I'll use,
Okay.
I don't know, there's too many microphones at this
Yeah.
point, yeah. Thank you so much. Dr. Villegas, if you want to join us on the stage, and I'll invite the rest of our panelists to join us on the stage as well at this point. Thank you. I'm really grateful for everybody being here again. My name is Jonathan Beaver. I'm a UCF Associate Professor of Ethics and Digital Culture, and I direct, with Dr. Kubler, our Center for Ethics. I'm going to facilitate our panel discussion this evening. You've met Dr. Villegas. As you know, Dr. Villegas is a research scientist with Google Brain, and his work is on the AI tech side, generative modeling, video generation, using machine learning tools. Also joining Dr. Villegas, Dr. Angela Hernandez-Carlson.
Not doctor.
Professor, sorry. Professor Carlson is Professor Hernandez Carlson is a UCF lecturer of animation and animation history with our School of Visual Art and Design. Angela is a UCF alum whose work explores ways that we use animated media for positive change. Her latest work, 2030, has been shown internationally, and some of you might have seen it recently screened at the Central Florida Film Festival. Kedra Daniels Navaroli is a McKnight Doctoral Fellow on a Text and Technology PhD program. Her interdisciplinary research examines intersections among curation, digital technologies, and representation. She brings a rich professional background in direction and museum curation to her work, and currently serves on the boards of the Association of Academic Museums and Galleries and the Surface Design Association. And finally, Dr. Stephen Fiore is on our panel, is our newly minted, congratulations, Dr. Fiore, UCF Pegasus Cognitive Science Program in the Department of Philosophy and the School of Modeling, Simulation, and Training. His multidisciplinary research focuses on the learning, problem solving, and performance of teams socially and through technologies. His work in leadership has earned several awards and resulted in over 200 scholarly publications. You can read a lot more about our panelists in our program and online. I'm really grateful for everybody's time this evening. What we'll do next is I'm going to sit in my seat and direct a few initial questions at our panelists before I turn things over to you all, and we'll walk around with a microphone and ask questions. You are welcome to ask questions of our panelists. So thank you, and I'll sit and get started. I want to start with a question for you, Dr. Fiore, about the creative process. So the question is AI-generated art merely a new tool for the creative process, or is there something more or different going on?
I think it's important to consider that question for whom is it a tool? And if you look at something like the visual arts and you consider how technology and tools have changed through the millennia, you look at the paintbrush, for example, Ruben called AI a new kind of paintbrush. And as a tool, as a technology, we've seen an influence within art with all these new technologies. It could be the paintbrush, it could be like material sciences, or how the chemical sciences have altered paints and pigments. So art has always evolved with new technologies, but I think AI is coming at it from a different direction. It's more like how the camera as a technology influenced art. And it influenced it in different ways, because on the one hand, it put pressure on art because of the realism the camera allowed and afforded. And you saw a shift from people who were painting landscapes that were very popular in the 19th century, and they're like, well, why do we need that anymore? And some suggest that Impressionism was a reaction to that tool, because they said, well, we can do something different, we need to do something different, and they wanted to move away from that realism. So that was a kind of external pressure, but what the camera also did was allowed people who wouldn't normally be a visual artist to be an artist. And I think that's where you might likely to see the influence. AI is a tool. It may not be used by people in the visual arts now. It could be, but I think more likely they're going to see people outside the visual arts use it as a creative outlet that they might not have been able to do anything before with.
So your read then is that AI can be an expansion of the creative process for folks who aren't otherwise trained or have the tools or technologies to do so.
Precisely.
Other panelists, if you'd like to weigh in, I'd be happy to hear your responses to that same question.
Sure. Hello. Yes, so to jump off of that, I think that for a lot of people, it democratizes art. And so for a lot of people, if they do not have the money to buy the art tools, if they do not have a space to create these pieces of art, they can still take something that they're imagining and see it visually. At least personally, I know many friends, when they play board games, they're able to use AI to imagine, have a more visual imagination of these places that they're thinking up. And so I think it, at least for those, as Dr. Fiore said, for those who are outside of the visual arts, I feel that it will have much more of an entertainment value, as opposed to people using it to make something that they, not so much that they want to create art, they're using it to entertain themselves and just have fun.
Oh, you go.
No, you don't feel any pressure.
I was going to say, as a curator, I can speak to this too.
Yeah,
I guess I should. I have not curated AI specific artists who utilize AI yet. I know that it's coming, but I haven't yet. And I agree that it is a tool at this point, but one that I think that we need to be conscious about its limitations. There are wonderful scholars doing work, and Angela and I were speaking just before this when she was talking to me about the images that were projected here. And I ask, if I go and I say, show me a person riding a horse, what color is that person likely to be on that horse? And so I think there's an issue when we're talking about, data sets and where this information is coming from, about input and how we address that. And I think that recognizing that it's a tool helps us to think about what's missing in utilizing it to the best of our ability. And so as a curator, and I'll talk a little bit later about artists who are utilizing it to address that very same gap, that we just need to be conscious of what the possibilities are, the challenges are, and the risks.
Yeah, Kedra, if I may follow up, when I think about democratization, Angela, your point, I hear these tensions, right? There's sort of two sides of a coin I can think through. We can think about democratization at the user end, but Kedra, your concerns were about maybe democratization at the input end.
Absolutely.
Right, so I wonder if you can speak a little bit more about these sort of richer ethical concerns, because it seems like when we think about more users interfacing with the system, there inevitably become concerns about justice.
Absolutely, and I think that it affords us some unique opportunities. One of that being acknowledgement and recognition, for sure. And there are scholars such as Joy Blumwini and Dr. Michelle Elam at Stanford, who's working specifically at human-centered artificial intelligence, the center called HI. And so with Dr. Elam's work, it's very much focused on thinking about these questions of ethics. And if I am, asking a computer program to generate a picture or a work of art, and the only input into that system has been Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, it's going to generate based on the information that we as humanity, society, people are giving it. And if we aren't really expansive in the breadth and scope of the information that we are giving these systems, then we're limiting what that system is ultimately able to put out. And so I think that that's an affordance that, yes, that it is allowing access, but again, we need to be cognizant about, we're seeing the tail end of that, right? When you go in and type something in Google and Google looks for it, it's based on information that it has. And if we never give these systems the information to start with, we're limiting what the output can be and limiting what the creative process can be and how it can be a tool.
Right on. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Villegas, I wonder if you wanted to respond to that, because a big theme of your talk and your thinking has been how these technologies can help us democratize access and agency and development. But do you see these same sort of justice-based concerns as a thrust through the work you're doing?
Yeah, I see this, not just in the image generation and methods. It's like in the text generation. There's also really a lot of concerns about what the model was exposed to, and then what the model, people actually even sometimes trick the model into generating things that maybe we do not intended the model to do. But yeah, that's why at least at Google we try to, while we're developing these systems, we're trying to also we keep this in mind, so that the model, we have some type of some type of safe rails or guardrails, sorry, to prevent these problems. But it's a new, because this technology, as you guys have seen, is just kind of it's exponentially getting better in the past couple of years. There hasn't been time really to address all the issues that come with these technologies. And I know like multiple labs are actually trying to figure this out. That's why maybe you see maybe something is not released or something like that, because we want to make sure that there's not going to be any unintended harms. Because also another thing is that we we don't fully understand how these models work. We just know how to train them and get them to do things, but we don't fully understand how they work. So we don't. It's hard to also limit some outputs or kind of like make sure that it doesn't do like harmful things. But so it's still research that needs to be done for this.
It's so interesting to think more about the sort of guardrails on the coding. And audience, you might remember Microsoft's Tay a few years back. Do you remember the AI system that came online and was quickly taken offline? Dr. Fiore, do you want to introduce us to Tay? Do you remember that story?
Sure. So these models they're trained and then they're released, but they learn from the humans interacting with it. And Microsoft mistakenly released that one, I don't think with very good guardrails, if out any guardrails. And if you're familiar with social media today, it often brings out the worst behavior of people, and it quickly created a monster that was very offensive, and it just created quite a backlash against the downside of artificial intelligence. But I wanted to ask a question getting back to the democratization. Given this challenge of training data not really being representative of the world population, is it learning from the new images that are being generated? So if a budding artist goes in and tweaks it to say, I want this to be more representative of my culture, is it learning from that? And then is it therefore going to have greater representation over time because more people are using it?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we've discussed with people in our lab. So eventually the model is going to start learning from its own outputs. So maybe that's a way to address the data problem. Try to generate data that is representative of what we want the model to generate. But yeah, it's possible. Right now, right now the scraping data over the internet is becoming more because of the problems that it may arise, it's becoming more limited. But eventually, I think, the model will learn from its own outputs, and maybe that's the way to address the issues. We get the model to output the data that's missing, so we can get a better distribution of the learning.
Maybe perhaps those of you who know me know that I sometimes wear a tinfoil hat out of tech concerns, but when I hear about AI learning from its own output, I think about the Gremlins problem. Do you remember the movie about Gremlins? Like, don't feed them after midnight because they... So there's this concern about AI algorithms or large language models talking to one another and learning from each other. There can be these feedback loops that could run without appropriate guardrails out of control. So there's all kinds of really interesting potential benefits and risks to think through in that space as well. If I may just shift gears a little bit, Professor Hernandez, I wanted to ask you a question about this really interesting Ars Technica article I read back in February now, which feels like 100 years ago in AI development space. But back in February, Ars Technica reported that the comic book Zarya at the Dawn, whose images were created by Midjourney AI in 2022, had its copyright revoked. So it was the copyright was reissued to its human author, Castanova, but that copyright only now applied to text and arrangement of images, not the art. Since the court ruled no human input or intervention went into the image creation. Castanova argued back, and I'm going to quote here, she said, "It's fundamental to understand that the output of a generative AI model depends directly on the creative input of the artist and is not random." So there's a tension there between what the court decided and what Castanova as an artist claimed. So there's a legal thing we could talk about, but more generally, I was interested, from your perspective as an artist, do you think what's the right decision in this space?
So I do agree with the end result in that they re-registered the copyright only on the text. However, for a different reason. And so that is because, again, as we mentioned, these algorithms work on huge data sets that they have essentially scrubbed from the internet. And so many of these images that they're working on are copyrighted. They are stock images that they have not paid the licensing fees for. And so, myself as an artist, many artists use stock images, they use other images, they use images of models, of landscapes, of various assets to create a new original piece. However, the key here is that we have to pay for the use of those images. We have to pay for the use of that model's likeness. We have to pay for the use of that image taken by the photographer. And in the event that the image was taken at a location that is privately owned, you may actually also need a license for the use of that likeness of the location, if it's a privately owned location and not like a publicly well-known place such as the Statue of Liberty or the Eiffel Tower. And not only that, but your licensing fee is also dependent on how many times that image is going to be used. So if you're doing a mass marketing campaign where you're going to have billboards and TV ads and whatnot, your licensing fee is going to be based on millions of iterations of that image. And so, which obviously, I'm sure most of you can guess, that's going to be a lot more, right? And so I think going forward, we really need to understand that these algorithms, even though it has the word intelligence in the name, it's pattern recognition. And the patterns were originally created by people, by other artists. And so those artists need to be adequately compensated for that work, and they need to be adequately credited. And so I would say if someone is using an algorithm that has a database based on stock images that have been paid for, that have been released, I would say they just, sure, give them a copyright for those generations that they are creating. However, if you cannot prove that, then you cannot, you legally cannot, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the word, I'm so sorry, I forgot the word. You cannot confidently give that copyright.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. And so, so I think that is a key term in how we will go forward in making sure that this is a technology that is used and led by artists and not just something that, people are saying, oh, it's going to replace artists, which I don't think it will. Because again, it depends on the input of artists in order to create the images around you. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. As I was thinking about this space, I'm going to stream of consciousness here for a second, but I was thinking about my son. My 7-year-old is learning about the history of hip hop. Mm-hmm. And the early history of hip hop is the history of remixing and sampling, mm-hmm. right? So there's a sense in which these conversations are not new conversations. We've been having these for a long time. Like what is when we sample a bit of a track and import it and rap over it or speak over it, we add to it, we recreate something new and claim it as our own. There have been a long history of legal challenges, ethical conversations. In what ways do you panelists think that those conversations can inform what's happening now? Like what's relevantly different about AI as an emerging technology that's different than, say, music remixing?
Well, and again, personally, I feel that there's not much different to it. It's, it's the same story, but just in a different era with a different technology. Even back in historical art, in Baroque and Impressionism, you would see those artists because a lot of time their education was spent sitting in the Louvre and many of these art museums. So they would learn by replicating and sampling, remixing these previous works. So this is not a new concept in the history of art or the history of humankind. It's just a different technology, and I think that the fact that the thing that is doing the remixing is now a computer, and so that input is starting to be distant from the human. I think that is what is causing a lot of the concern and putting this at a much higher issue than previously.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that there are artists who are using the affordances of AI to reclaim these sorts of histories. So, part of anything, whether it's hip hop or whatever, when it gets commodified, often the origins of these stories get lost, especially with so many of them being grounded in marginalized and underrepresented communities. And so, Dr. Beaver, you know this because I wrote about him for your class. Professor, an artist by the name of Rashad Newsom, who's based out in California, who is an artist in residence at Stanford at their Center for Human-Centered AI, and he's particularly interested in remixing and reclaiming the history of Vogue culture. So the idea of voguing was not just a popular song that Madonna made in the 90s. It was based on a practice from the Harlem Renaissance era in New York of Black and Latinx queer communities who created these ballroom scene spaces where they could express themselves without criminalization. And so it's a very specific form of dance that Rashad Newsom has developed a humanoid AI platform called Being, and Being literally is composed to look like a cyborg, is modeled in the face after an African mask, and he specifically chose this culture of Africa because it is a female mask that is worn by a male dancer, so he's recalling this history of masquerade in African culture. But he specifically uses Being to catalog the changes in voguing over time. So this performative dance that has gone through several iterations, and he is using Being as a form of sort of reclaiming the archive. So thinking about the history of this dance, how it's been commodified, and the people who were credited with its origins being left off. And so he uses Being. Being has at least 2-3 different iterations at this point, and all of them are fascinating. But in this particular aspect, he's thinking about how artificial intelligence can help us reclaim those, quote unquote, lost histories, or those histories endangered of being lost. And so I do see, again, I keep talking about affordances and challenges, but I do think that there are artists who are going into this work with a real mind for the way in which these stories can be remixed and retold in a way that helps to educate and preserve art practice.
Please.
Yeah, this is obviously a very complex conversation, and to help frame it, it's useful to break it apart from the ethical, the legal, and the societal implications. And we've heard a little bit about each of this, and just working backwards with the last one, I think when you talk about the cultures and appropriation, that's more the societal implications, and it can go both ways. So we heard a good example of how it can be used positively to reclaim some of what might be lost, and that's a nice use of a tool for positive. But the example of copyright, there we've got ethical and legal issues. So when it comes to monetization, when it comes to people using images and trying to make money from it, that's where we need to bring in the experts and talk about it from a legalistic perspective. But then there's the ethical issues, and I think Angela did a good job breaking that apart, because to a large degree, what we're seeing with these creations here are not that different than people, how they've been trained. Here's a genre, learn that genre. Here's another genre, learn that genre. And then they go and do what they do best, and they combine and make something new. So to say that they're simply copying and using that to blend and make a creation that didn't exist before, that's not any different, like we heard. That's not that different than what has been going on throughout the history of the visual arts. But the general point is, don't get mired in the complexities. And when we have these conversations, look at them separately. Look at them from the ethical standpoint. What's the right thing to do? Look at it legally. How do we want to address this from a monetization? And then societally, what are the right things to do from a societal and cultural standpoint? Otherwise, we're just going to get lost in the conversations.
Yeah, thank you. It is easy to get lost, especially when things are moving so quickly, and that's one of my big concerns with especially digital technologies, is that they do move so quickly that that's one of the, at least for me, deciding factors between early issues of remixing, say audio remixing, and what's happening now is just the speed of technological change. But focusing, if I can, Dr. Villegas, for you on one last ethical question. Back in March 2023, I asked ChatGPT, which was then ChatGPT-3, a very specific question. I asked it, what ethical issues are most prominent in the relationship between artificial intelligence and art? And it replied, and I quote here, as an AI language model, I cannot opine on what are the most prominent ethical issues in the relationship between artificial intelligence and art. However, it goes on to opine, some potential ethical issues in this relationship could include IP issues, intellectual property, authenticity, bias, responsibility, and transparency. That's a pretty big list, and I did only ask it about ethical implications, not the broader LC ethical, social, and legal implications. But I wondered, Dr. Villegas, from your perspective, what should be our focus moving forward? Like, what's the biggest concern you could point to for our thinking about the relationship between AI and art?
I think everything that was mentioned just now, I think all of them have like the same, to me at least, the importance, because like you said, things that's basically caught all of us off guard. Like, it's not just like, you know, the general public, but even us, because we didn't predict this to start working as well as it did so quickly. So some of the, even maybe the copyright infringements and all these things that were done were likely an intended thing, because we're just trying to, you know, figure out how we can make these models work, and then just start working at like incredibly well in a way that we didn't expect. But yeah, there's the issues that you guys mentioned, but also the issue of I think you said responsibility, the ChatGPT. Yep. So that's one thing that's, at least I mean the way that I see it is so there's a like a kind of problem that it's kind of hard to address, that if these models are good enough, they should be able to create anything if they actually understand the world, you know. And that means you can also create horrible things, right? Which that's where the responsibility of the people that are making these models comes in play. And then at least, a lot of us are aware of this and are trying to limit our models from doing the horrible things that we don't want them to do. So that's the responsibility piece of it. But then the IP, right now, at least I've noticed in, you know, even there's with the companies that first started, like let's say I think it was Stability AI, like they would have these algorithms, the Stable Diffusion, generating images that were basically copying somebody else's style and just putting a dog in the middle or something like that. And now the companies that have this data was scraped from are starting to actually defend, you know, the artists and trying to figure out how we can all play nice together, and so the artists can get, you know, the remunerations they deserve, but at the same time trying not to slow down the progress, because then at the same time, even though these models are, you know, doing what they're doing, they're still opening up ways of for regular people to do things that they could not do otherwise. And like I said, and I brought the examples here. But even if regular people can generate some images, they're not going to be as good as an artist, right? So the examples of the videos that our artist friends that Google generated, I mean, it could be, it's empowering everybody at the end of the day. But the things that were already made, they need to be, or the artists need to be recognized for this. And so there's many problems. I mean, that's why a lot of companies are hesitant of just like, you know, putting out algorithms, because there's many issues that we're trying to address, because as I said, we didn't expect this to work this well so quickly.
And this has led to so many interesting issues, right? So Microsoft just in the last couple of months released or shifted the Ethics and Society group because they're under pressure to release models to the public more swiftly. And at the same time, you've got these open letters calling for the sort of the withholding of future development for a period of time so we can better understand these issues. So the landscape is moving so quickly. Getting ahead of it is hard.
Yeah, I think this open letter is a different issue. I think I think the progress, at least the research. So what I think needs to be, and I think I heard also a talk from Jan Lecon, and I agree with him that what needs to be slowed down, at least, is the product, making products from this, because people are making money off of learning from artists, and then they're just leaving artists behind. And this needs to be slowed down, but the research needs to continue, because we need to, while we're developing these things, we're figuring these methods, we're figuring out how to address the problems of these methods. If we just freeze everything, we're freezing also addressing the issues. So research needs to continue. But yeah, but then, yeah, so, but that's where I don't agree too much with the just stop everything, because we're going to create the, what is it called? The Terminator or whatever. Yeah. Skynet, yes. Because, I mean, that's not coming anytime soon. But
well, that's actually really helpful. I mean, that you're suggesting that to continue on the research so we can better understand what's happening, but slow down the commodification.
The slow down people taking advantage of the data sets the artists created to make money for their, that's what needs to be slowed down. But the research labs in universities, or research labs that are not really trying to make a profit, or I mean, eventually, of course, everything leads to profit, but they're trying to actually understand these methods and understand how to address the problems that these AI algorithms bring. Those should not be slowed down. Otherwise, we're just slowing down even addressing the issues, which is the reason we're trying to slow down to begin with. But yeah, that's what I think.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like we could do this all evening, but I want to make sure we open it up to our audience. So what I'd like to do now is actually, Dr. Villegas, switch with you. So I'm going to give you this microphone. I'm going to take that microphone. And what I'll do is just walk. Oh, Jen also has a microphone. So if anybody in the audience has questions for our panelists, raise your hand, and either Jen or I will walk around, and we'll just take turns.
Hello? Okay. One of you, the professor, I think, mentioned something about AI still needing artists in order to generate its images. I've been a commercial artist for over 30 years, and I also practice fine arts. I'm not so concerned about the fine arts. I think that people are always going to want images that are created by hand by humans. But my concern is on the commercial art side. The way that AI works at the moment is exactly the way that I work in my commercial art job. Someone comes to me and they give me a quote-unquote prompt, and then I create the artwork for them, and then they tell me what it is that they want changed or modified. Like I said, I've been a commercial artist for over 30 years, and in all that time and in all the companies that I have worked at, the artist is never the one that has the final say on what that art looks like. So, and AI, research is going to continue, and AI is going to get better and better. So can you guys make me feel a little better and that I'm going to make it to retirement before AI replaces me?
Yeah, so I believe that was myself. And one thing that we can point to is Adobe is pioneering their own AI algorithm to be incorporated into their products such as Photoshop and Illustrator. So again, this is where, us as artists, we have to be at the forefront of AI. We have to be at the forefront in deciding on how this is going to be used and how we can incorporate it into our creative process. So I see it is going to automate a lot of the more tedious tasks. So say, you're sketching an image and now you want that sketch cleaned up so that you can work with it, process it and refine it even more. Well, instead of you going through and painstakingly doing it, AI can do that for you. Also, again, making sure that we understand, again, AI is just pattern recognition. It's not making creative thought. It's not making conscious cognitive decisions. So there will always be a need for a human to interact with the other human. So when your client, especially, I'm sure you understand, sometimes clients don't always know how to express what they want. It can be difficult for them to sometimes say, and put to mind and put to words what they're thinking of, and it's not until you actually visually start presenting them with options that they're able to, say, oh, I like this, I like some of column A and column B, right? And so I think there will always be a need for that human interaction for that part of it. And again, this is not new. This is something that art in general, and especially my background, has dealt with before. So, back in the 70s and 80s when 3D animation started to come to the forefront, the 2D animators were very afraid of it. They thought, oh, the computer's going to take our jobs. It's going to replace us. There's never going to be any use for 2D animators in the future. And they were right about one thing. Their jobs were replaced, but it was not replaced by the computers. It was replaced by people who learned how to use those computers and who embraced that 3D animation. Because even though a digital animation program can automate a lot of the process of animation, you still need that human behind it using it as a tool. And so, again, that's why I say us as artists, and going off of Dr. Villegas, we cannot just, freeze it and say, no, we're not going to use AI at all. Because then we are giving up our agency in this conversation, we're giving up our place in it. And so, again, we need to be at the forefront. We need to make these decisions now before the technology runs away from us. Anyone else?
Anyone else? You have a question from this side?
Hello. I have a question specifically about AI democratization that you guys brought up. Specifically, so I'm in a PhD program at UCF in the human factors cognitive psychology, so we do a lot, our lab does quite a bit with AI art and AI in general, specifically large language models. And in the concerns about democratization and making art more accessible, I guess I kind of wanted to get you guys' take on, is it making art more accessible for the people who are technologically literate enough to use the technology that is presented? And so in the same way as in, if you couldn't use a camera, you could not be a photographer, people who can't use computers cannot use systems such as these and may not quite understand the art and where it comes from. And so are we selecting out a subset of people because they are not able to use this? Because technological literacy is something that is really hard to define and it's hard to understand. I tried. So that's just something that I kind of want to get y'all's take on. Any of you? Thank you.
I can, yeah. So if I understand correctly, so I think it's actually the current models, the language-based ones, are actually allowing a lot of everybody that knows how to talk, basically, or knows English or whatever language that the model is trained with, can generate art. Because right now, yeah, sure, you need to log into your computer and figure out how to go to the website or so on. But later on, maybe there's something like this where I can just say, give me a penguin wearing a funny hat, and then the image just shows up, because all it has to do is put whatever I said in English, put it into text, and then output the image.
No, I completely understand that. Where I'm getting at is there are people who don't know how to use a computer and get onto a website. They don't know how to navigate through something like Google. And to people who are technologically literate, we go, what? Like, everyone knows how to do that, but that's not exactly the case. And so in these cases, are we kind of basically saying art for me, not for thee, you know? And so I think that's where it's like, yes, if you can write, which that is a prerequisite to write a prompt, correct? It's to be literate enough to write. If you can read, which is to be able to use it enough in the case you have to actually be able to read, you can use these things. But what about people who can't, and does that mean they cannot enjoy this art or these technologies, and how are we making these technologies accessible enough for them?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. Like right now you have to log into the website, but eventually I can have this that all I have to do is talk to it, and then it will put it into text, go to the website, or let's say ChatGPT. Somebody figures out a way to get ChatGPT to do all of that for you, or some other method. The only people that I would think are excluded would be somebody, first in this case that I'm presenting, somebody that can't talk a particular language, but then they would be, if that person cannot talk, if they can at least handwrite or something, or even Braille or any of those things that can just put an input, and then everything else is done behind the scenes for them. This will likely get to that point eventually. Right now you have to log into the website because this is just starting to happen at this particular moment, but eventually it will get easier. Yeah, all you have to do is just know the language that the model understands.
We have a gentleman over here.
Dr. Villegas, you said something I thought was very interesting. You said, we really don't understand how these things work. We can train them, but we don't understand how they work. So I have two questions. One is, how can something created by humans have developed to the point where humans no longer understand how it works? And second, what are the ethical implications of continuing to expand these systems given that ignorance?
So what I mean by we don't understand how it works is that all the what I showed, that neural network connections in the middle, like those numbers are hard to interpret, but we understand how to design these things, like how to put the network together to get an output that makes sense, and how to train it to give it inputs, give it outputs. So we understand to that degree how these things work. It's just like, for example, when people create this art, some people have to know the language. The model is trained with English, but then there's some specific things, specific keywords that you have to figure out by trial and error that the model understands, that was not intended by the creators of the model. Like I don't know, I think there was some point where somebody figured out if you append some 3D term, I forgot the term, but the model gives you really nice outputs, and that's something that maybe the authors of the model didn't specifically make the model work better with these specific two words. I forgot again the words.
Ray tracing?
Yeah, it was. Let me see. I forgot. It wasn't like something like ray tracing. It was some specific term about some specific type of imaging, 3D imaging. But yeah, so that's what I mean. We don't understand. Like the creators didn't know if you say blah prompt, the model will create really nice images. That's what I mean. Like we don't know what's happening in the middle 100%. But then it's dangerous that what you said, that it's dangerous that we don't understand how it works. I agree with you. That's why there's the research needs to be done to understand better how it works, so we can prevent certain outputs that we do not want. But I want to clarify something, because when I say that, it goes into, the machine is going to go wild and destroy humanity. That's not going to happen, because the machine itself, it's guided by the human input. So what's giving the machine life at the moment is the inputs from a human. That's why you have the prompt engineers that recently started becoming more popular, that there are people that know how to communicate with the machine to get the outputs. But then the machine is not autonomous, where it says, I'm going to get an output and start doing random things on the internet and nobody can stop me. Machines are not to that point. It's just basically just, like we keep saying, it's just a tool that just hammering a nail, and then the nail is hammered. But then if the tool is not going to get itself up and then start hammering the nail on its own. So we're not to that point of, I guess, danger.
So there's a related problem to that they don't understand, and that's what they don't really understand is why it produced a particular output. And there's an entire sub-area of artificial intelligence research called explainable AI. And it's for that very reason that they call them black box models for that reason. We don't know why it gave a particular decision. We don't know why it produced a particular kind of output. So the federal government is investing a lot of money now to produce what it's called explainable AI, to try to unpack the decision processes that are within these neural network models to address this problem from a different perspective. So it's not just art, it's when a decision is made by an artificial intelligence system, the decision maker wants to know what was the reasoning behind that, and that's the very hard problem. So they're looking at it from a different perspective, but for the same reasons.
We've got another question over on this side.
Hi, Fiore. I actually was an undergrad in your class at one point. I have a specific question in regards to my interaction with language models, specifically ChatGPT. I found that it's not as easy as just inserting a prompt. I have to understand, specifically, literally, getting to detail of what I want it to do. Like, for example, I can say, draw me a picture. That's not enough. I have to say, act like a painter. Now, I want you to draw me this picture with all these details. I don't think that the general population would know that they have to get specific to that point, as much as me knowing, a lot of research methods and knowing the specifics of, how detailed I have to get. And I think that could impact the aspect of making art with artificial intelligence, of people understanding how to interact with these models and knowing that they have to use specific language to get the output that they want. And they can easily be frustrated if they're not progressing and not getting the output that they're expecting simply by just learning how to communicate. So as humans, we eventually have to learn how to talk to these models. So I would like to get your thoughts on that.
So I'd look at it from two perspectives. You're talking at the user design standpoint and how to create a technology that provides the affordances and makes it easier for anyone to use it, to not have to learn the technology itself, but has a more intuitive interface that allows them to do the kinds of things they're supposed to. And that's why this is an important area of research, and we haven't yet seen the traditional kinds of human factors, user design research with these because they're so new, but I'm sure there are students out there addressing that. The other way to look at it, though, is I think a larger concern where the people are going to change how they interact based upon the technology. And that's one of the things that come up when you see people mention the dangers of these kinds of generative AI. They could very well train us and manipulate us. And you could pull the thread on your question, because if people are not interacting with a well-designed system, they're going to be trained by that system on how to interact. And sure, it may be benign when it comes to something like art, but when they start interacting with ChatGPT and changing the way they are asking questions, it could very well change the way they think and change the way they behave. And to me, that's the biggest concern we have.
Two more questions.
Hello. So UCF graduate. I'm kind of like a tech enthusiast, and I've been following AI for the past 5 years. And it seems that the past year, well, since 2020, since the pandemic, seems to be like an inflection point with artificial intelligence, but it's specifically 2022 and 23. Even this weekend, we've seen papers being released from OpenAI talking about sparks of general intelligence. And this weekend alone, I've seen models that have been released that are ChatGPT connected to the internet, and I've played with those models, and it seems that the artificial intelligence is kind of prompting itself at this point. So what's your perspective on that, on the dangers of that, and how that'll affect maybe, since things are accelerating so quickly, to your point, you said you weren't even expecting it to work so well so quickly. What's kind of your perspectives into the future, and what are some of the threats, considering it's moving so fast?
So regarding the prompting itself, I think it still requires a human to prompt the ChatGPT to maybe then prompt itself. So it's not really like loose just by itself making decisions. But yeah, it being released into the internet. Yeah, the model can maybe even learn to. I guess that's actually what the most useful scenario, I guess, because then you don't have to really navigate the internet. You can just tell ChatGPT, find me this thing or some subject, and then you just let it make the decisions and ask itself how to find the subject and so on. Yeah, it's I guess so. Yeah, it's a tricky scenario. So what was your concern about?
It was more of what's your perspective going into the future. Seeing that you're seeing things accelerate so quickly. But in the case of AutoGPT, it is prompting itself. It's kind of following its own guideline. It'll create its own separate AI instances to go do and complete a task, and then it'll chain them together and make its own conclusion. And then the human goes in and says, well, yes, I agree with this, or I don't. But it's kind of, and like I said, there's papers that have been released recently where they're seeing sparks of general intelligence, and they're saying that ChatGPT 5 might already be approaching. So what's your perspective, seeing things accelerating so quickly, where you see things going, what are some of the risks?
So I guess the first question is this, you're talking about AGI, so people keep talking about that. So first, I guess, what does AGI mean? It means, I guess, artificial intelligence that can do multiple things. I think eventually these models will be able to automate about a lot of the tasks that maybe humans would not like to do, like navigate, like you said. It spawns a bunch of ChatGPTs and start searching. It will get to that point, but I wouldn't be worried about this AGI but this is not going to happen anytime soon. But this is, I guess, going into more probably impossible scenario, which is self-awareness. This model is not self-aware, so it's not going to cause the doomsday scenario that we're thinking of. Even with this AGI, it will just, again, it'd be a useful tool for people to use to accomplish multiple tasks, because it's general, I guess, in a sense. But it will continue evolving for sure. But again, we have to, going back to the slowing down things, we as a research community need to, while this is evolving, and then OpenAI needs to do the same, and all these companies working on this need to do the same, is figure out how to mitigate any unexpected or unwanted behavior by the model. And what I mean by behavior is, like, you prompt it and then it does things that maybe are not desirable, but I'm not talking about like self-awareness. So that's something that I guess that would be what will cause what we're fearing, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, or at all. Because it goes into a whole different thing. Yeah.
Well, my friends, hopefully you can hear me. My friends, there's great questions here, and the bad news is we've probably run out of time for questions. The good news is there's more to come, and you can ask your questions directly to our panelists. So, Dr. Villegas and Dr. Beaver and distinguished panelists, thank you very much for a really exciting discussion, but also thank you, guests, for really good engagement and questions. I really appreciate that. I think, please join me in giving a round of applause to everyone for their engagement. So you've probably smelled what's coming from the back of the room. So you know I'm the only thing that stands between you and some really good food. So I had better make this brief, right? But I do have a few more things to say. Events like this are possible because of great support from the community. And, okay, you knew this was coming, right? This is the dreaded ask for money. But I want you to hang on and listen closely because it's an opportunity for you to directly support what really matters to you. So it turns out UCF Day of Giving is April 13th, but that's a little too short with all the great things happening at UCF all year long. So we're asking you to make a gift now. And while you're at the festival, this is really easy. There's no need to wait because on the back of the bigger program, there's a QR code, and if you take a picture with your smartphone, it'll take you to a link. Now here's the cool thing. The link from the QR code lets you specify which area you'd like to support. So that could be the Center for Ethics, that could be UCF Celebrates the Arts, it could be scholarships for students, it could even be something apart from the arts and the humanities. You get to support what you love and care about. So please make your gift tonight, or you can talk to one of us about ways that you can support your hometown university. Now we're ready for our reception, and I really hope you enjoy this unique part of our event. You get to treat yourself to some catered refreshments as you experience hands-on demos that are going to show you some of the great work that our students are doing in this field of AI and related. Also, you'll be able to meet some of our speakers and panelists and enjoy discussing AI with one another. So I'll now ask our students and presenters to begin moving to the exhibits, and with that, I'm going to close the speaking portion of our event. I want to thank you for your participation tonight, and I hope we're going to see you at other UCF events. I'll just ask you one last time, please, a round of applause for all of our sponsors, organizers, and participants. Good night.